Thank you. And I have no changes in the agenda for this evening, so is there a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Barberina, supported by Commissioner Boyd to approve the agenda as submitted. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And is there an approval of the minutes as submitted of our December 6th meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Their support?
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Barberina and supported by Commissioner Boyd to approve the December 6 minutes as submitted. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next is public comments for any non-agenda items. So is there anyone here that wishes to address the commission for anything not on the agenda? Okay. Item 7 on the agenda, unfinished business, application 2493, conditional rezoning at 40700 Ann Arbor Road. And the planner will please read her report.
Thank you, Commissioners. All right. So this last came before you a few months ago, back in September, and this is an application to conditionally rezone 40700 Ann Arbor Road from the Office Services Ann Arbor Road Corridor District to the General Ann Arbor Road Corridor District. So moving from an office district to a more general commercial district with voluntary conditions that have been expressed by the applicant.
Yeah, excuse me, is your mic on?
Oh, it is. Sorry. Is that, do I have to talk this close to it? Is that better?
I don't think you need to.
Huh.
Must be just the way it is then. Okay.
Is this, no? Not working? All right. It's going to be a yelling day.
It is working, it's
Just quiet? Got it.
Oh, okay.
I can't either.
I'm going
Maybe
to
you
yell.
could just move the mic closer to you.
This is
wouldn't
the
have to-
farthest it comes out,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately.
All right.
So I can't get it any closer.
Okay.
But, okay, I'm going to crouch and also kind of yell.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry, everybody. Sorry in advance, anyone who's streaming this as well. Okay, so this is a conditional rezoning request from the Office Services Ann Arbor Road Corridor District to the General Ann Arbor Road Corridor District. So it's a conditional rezoning request from an office-based district to a general commercial district. And as a conditional rezoning, this rezoning includes voluntary conditions that the applicant has offered to put on the rezoning itself to improve compliance and harmony with the surrounding properties and the criteria that are used to evaluate a rezoning. As with all conditional rezonings, the Planning Commission is not able to place conditions on the applicant. They must either choose to accept or reject the voluntary conditions that the applicant has posed. So in front of you, you have a document called Statement of Voluntary Conditions. This is a signed and notarized affidavit from the property owner of exactly which conditions they are proposing. To highlight some differences between the previous time this application was before you and now, I think the biggest one is that the proposed car wash has been removed entirely. The half of the site that was going to be used for a car wash is now designated as future development area, and that would be eligible for any use that is permitted under the ARC district to be developed at some future time. And this, in the meantime, would be sodded with turf grass for future development. And then the third most notable condition is that the drive-through would operate only between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. And I apologize, in my memo, I accidentally wrote 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. That was an error on my part, a typographical error. You'll see in the affidavit that the applicant has provided, it is 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So those are the main changes from last time. The other thing I would like to draw your attention to is that in front of you, you will see you have a marked up page of the final page of our letter, which looks like this. Should just be a single page on the desk in front of you. The reason you have this is because the way this review was originally written was not reflective of the fact that the Planning Commission cannot place their own conditions on the applicant. So should you choose to recommend approval or denial of this application tonight, I just wanted you to know that you cannot place these additional conditions on an applicant under a conditional rezoning. And I think this was, written by Laura a while back, and I just wanted to make sure that the language was very clear to you, so I gave you this marked up version. Does anyone have questions about that markup or why those have been noted to you?
So we can't place conditions on it? Can you run that by me again?
Yes, so under state law, an applicant may offer voluntary conditions, but the planning commission cannot modify them or add additional ones. So the way this, this originally, our recommendation was written, as we said, based on the findings in this review, it is recommended that the conditional rezoning of 40700 Ann Arbor Road to the ARC Corridor District be recommended for approval contingent on the following items. You cannot put those contingencies on the applicant. The only one that you could reasonably do is the successful resolution of the consent judgment by the Board of Trustees, because that is the domain of the Board of Trustees. But the other ones,
anyway, right?
yeah. Does that make more sense? That's just how state law is written.
It's weird because the applicant is supposed to kind of read your mind.
A little bit. It is weird. And the other thing is the applicant, they put forward this statement of voluntary conditions. And if this got to the Board of Trustee level, where this was actually going to become an ordinance that rezones a piece of property, the board would then incorporate conditions into the ordinance itself in a way that has legal standing. So that would be the ultimate way that it's codified. Does that make more sense? All right. So our recommendation remains the same from the previous time that you saw this. We actually believe that the removal of the car wash enhances the compatibility of the proposed conditional rezoning, given that the main concerns were the nuisance that the car wash might produce on this site. And additionally, I would like to draw your attention to the section at the bottom of page 2, which addresses the consent judgment. So I'm just going to read this out for the benefit of the public and anyone who might be viewing at home. The township attorney has reviewed the consent judgment for the site and determined that the Board of Trustees is the authorizing body in the case of amendments or termination. Previously, the commission inquired as to whether the consent judgment must be terminated prior to commission action. The township has determined that the authorization of the termination or amendment prior to commission action on the rezoning is not required. Authorization of termination or amendment prior to Board of Trustees action would be required. This arrangement is necessary to avoid a scenario where the consent judgment is terminated, but a redevelopment proposal never materializes. For example, in the event the rezoning is denied by the board. As such, the Planning Commission may make a recommendation on this application subject to the successful resolution of the consent judgment with the Board of Trustees. Does anyone have questions about that for myself or Mr. Bennett? Okay. I know it's a weird one.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Okay, great. All right.
Nani, just to be clear, on page 2 of Laura's report,
Yep.
you're telling us that the summary of substantial changes, it says the addition of a condition that drive-through would operate only between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. You're saying it actually should read 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., correct?
Yes, that was an accidental
Okay,
transposition.
just so everybody has got that. Thank you.
Yep,
That concludes your report?
yep.
Okay,
Unless you have any further questions for me.
No, but I would like to turn to Mr. Bennett with some additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one thing I wanted to bring to the commission's attention is that a car wash was a proposed use of the rezoning prior to this resubmission, and that there was some concern about that among the board and the commissioners. I'd just like to say that the way the property is currently zoned, which is consent judgment, a car wash would not be allowed on that property. I believe it was zoned either OS or OSARC prior to that, and a car wash is not permitted in either the OS or the OSARC zoning districts. Under the ARC zoning district, an auto wash is a special use, which means that in the future, if the owner of the property wants to petition for the special use of an auto wash facility, they could bring that motion in front of the Planning Commission, and if they comply with the requirements or the conditions set forth in section 2.7 of the zoning ordinance, under state law, the commission would have to approve that special use. It's mandatory, it is not discretionary, if they comply with the conditions set forth in Article 2.7 of the zoning ordinance. So it's still out there that this property could be used as a car wash.
And I have one more thing to add, apologies. In the conditions offered for rezoning, the applicant does offer to prohibit 7 uses in particular. These include schools for arts and crafts, private clubs and lodge halls, mortuaries, churches, temples, and places of worship, bus stations, commercial parking garages, and public schools. So those are the ones they're offering to permanently prohibit as a part of the conditional rezoning.
The other thing I would add is that the commission, as Nani has stated, conditional zoning requires unilateral imposition of conditions by the applicant or owner. The planning commission cannot suggest, recommend, or do anything else with respect to those proposed conditions. It's got to be unilateral on behalf of the applicant. So as it stands today,
They offered to permanently bar the implementation of a car wash. Did I hear that wrong?
They did not
I did
offer
not.
to prohibit a car wash. They removed the car wash from their development
They
plan.
removed it from the
So
development plan.
previously, they were, as a part of the conditional rezoning, asking that the car wash use be approved as a part of that, and that has been removed.
Okay,
But it's not prohibited.
But if we approve the conditional rezoning for the drive-through restaurant, we are in effect setting the stage. If they want to put in a car wash, we would not have any control as long as they complied with the state mandates, as I understand it.
For a
well,
special land
I'm not going to say that. What I would say is the planning commission has to make factual determinations under section 2.7 of the zoning ordinance. Those list the conditions for approval of a special use. And if the commission found its fact that those conditions were fulfilled, then the commission would have to approve the special use application.
But they would still have to submit for a special land use review and meet those criteria.
Absolutely.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a couple of questions for the applicant, but we'll.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure everyone's had their chance up here. Okay, and the applicant is here?
Good evening, I'm Brian Amon, attorney for Allrig Development, which is the development leader for the owner of the property. Let me just fill up, I don't want to get in trouble for not printing my name here, so there we go, got that done. And thank you, I'll just take 2 seconds to a quick intro, and then glad to entertain any questions you have. Thank you for your time again tonight. Much colder night, even though we always have other things to do, but other than try to stay warm. And I want to thank the planning staff for their work and the township attorney also in terms of trying to sort out the elements of this process, including the consent judgment as we tried to work through. I had the privilege of going down and pulling out the microfiche and reading every single page of the court file, and still have pictures of it on my thing, so it's been just fun. So anyway, we have with us our team from Allrig Development, as well as the engineering and traffic consultants as well, if there are any questions for that as well. I want to share that we took great care to listen to the concerns that were raised last time at the Planning Commission by the planning commissioners and the community. And in fact, we understood and we heard the concerns about car washes in particular, not only the concerns about the potential nuisance and impact, but also the concerns about having done our due diligence on marketing, on whether there's a market for that in light of the existing car washes and what the impacts would be. So it was, that really led to the decision to pull it off. I can't say today there's not, there is no plan at this point to have a car wash, but we are doing the due diligence that was recommended as it relates to what would make sense on that site. We've also heard from significant folks within the community that they would like, just as I was involved in leading out the Henry Ford development across the street, we've heard from folks they'd like us to consider a redevelopment all the way to the corner, including if we could somehow find a way to attract the veterinary clinic owner and the Burger King to try to be a part of an overall redevelopment. So we're looking at the totality of what we can do all the way to Haggerty if we can get rolling on the first project. We have to first get started with our first project to have credibility to have those conversations. But we heard the community, and we want them to know that we think our plans tonight reflect that. We also came in with the change of the conditions being offered to include the limitation on the hours of operation, because we heard concerns about that as well. The good news about that is, as well, as you'll see we've offered that the plans before you that are being shown with their setbacks, with their general elements that are in there, are part of the condition. That site plan you see with the multiples of setback, instead of your ordinance requirement of a 35-foot setback, we're 5 times that as it relates to the building. So we've done certain things with this site to significantly enhance it beyond any ordinance requirements, but that plan that you see is one of the largest conditions that we've offered in terms of the extra trees and all these other elements that are in there. They're all part of those conditions being offered. We also know there's a desire to get rid of the existing building, and we thoroughly appreciate that, and we are equally desirous of that. So I think what you'll see is that in light of the plan before you, we also acknowledge that if there is whatever we hope to do in the future on that parcel is going to require submission to the Planning Commission, a process as it relates to special land use, and I do fully expect that when we do get to the Board of Trustees, if we get there, we essentially are running more than just one process. While you are reviewing a conditional rezoning application tonight, the trustees will be engaging in a deliberation, as the township attorneys explained, first on a decision to whether to amend or terminate the consent judgment. So we expect there to be a conversation with the trustees at that point in time about other concerns they may have other than the conditions we've offered at this point in time. Because as a predicate to us to being able to rezone the site, we have to first deal with the consent judgment. So it wouldn't shock me that we hear concerns about a potential car wash as one of the uses in a special land use that's there, as when we get to that part of a conversation about the consent judgment amendment. So I would hope that the Planning Commission works with us tonight to give us the approval to at least get that conversation started. And I think what you see before you is a well thought out plan with the input that we've heard from the residents and the Planning Commission from the last meeting. So beyond that, prepared to answer any questions you might have. So,
Anyone have questions? You said you had a couple?
Yeah, just want to confirm the owner of the property still is the car wash organization, correct?
it is.
Okay.
It is. I will tell you, by the time we get to the Board of Trustees, I think that may not be the case. I think it will be Allrig Development. We're in process to actually make that transaction, but it's not closed or whatever. So I can only say that it's our intent to actually we're undertaking that transaction to purchase it from them so that they would no longer be the owner of the site. And certainly the township requirements are that the owner of the site authorize and be the applicant on anything. So if at any point ownership changes in that site between now and Board of Trustees, you'll be the first to know.
Couple of questions about your site plan. First of all, you said that you would consider adding those evergreen trees between the site and Haggerty Road, but it looked like it does not include fixing the actual road there. You were just going to add the trees north of the road. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, fixing, what did you say?
The road that goes along the back of that property,
We
not
will-
in the best condition.
We'll be repairing the road in its entirety as it's on our site, that which we
Right,
have the
yes,
right to do.
exactly,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
But-
we don't have the right to repair the rest of the road.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
but you are proposing adding the evergreen trees?
Yeah, the entire site will be redone, including that drive as it relates to our site as well, as part of that.
Okay. The next thing is, your plan showed a underground water detention basin to the west of the drive-in, kind of it's in the property that would have been the car wash.
Correct.
I'm not an engineer, and I don't know if our engineer's here, but that looked to be a pretty large installation. Is that water detention basin capable of including the water that would come from a car wash application?
We are required by state law and then as applied and managed by the county public services and the stormwater, the drain commissioner, former drain commissioner office. If you touch this site, we have to provide stormwater management for the entirety of the site. And so what you see is a stormwater management system that is designed to manage not just the restaurant that would be coming, but the entirety of the site. And we have to basically, the county will require us to prepare it and design it for the entirety of any use that could go on the balance of that site as well. So it'll be, that retention system you see is intended to serve the entire site as it relates to any potential use on that site that would be allowed under the township.
So it could serve for a car wash?
It
if
could,
that's what-
it could,
okay.
it could serve the car wash or any other use that the township would allow on that site. But yeah, so.
All right. And Attorney Bennett, you asked my question about the car wash being a regular use for the RC zone, so that's already been taken care of. Okay, that's all I had right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else that have a question or comment?
So the proposed restaurant shell building is 2,500 square feet approximately?
Correct.
Do you have a tenant?
We actually have a tenant that's starting to be here, but we've been, and I'm glad to indicate that it's Starbucks, but that your approval and your consideration is based on any prospective user of that kind of a space. But yes, it is. It's intended to be Starbucks.
Okay. Yeah, I just was curious because, you know, you're building a shell building, I would imagine any sort of fast food franchise would want to have it designed to their specifications.
Absolutely. But as your planner and attorney pointed out in the last time, your deliberation and your thought process is based on the nature of the use, not the name of the use.
Right.
And so, yeah. So.
Right.
Anyone else? Okay, well, what's your pleasure?
Is there anyone here that wants to talk?
Well, it's not a public hearing, but is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this issue? Yes.
Good evening. My name's Jack Knowles. I was here at the,
Can you sign in too? Don't
oh,
forget
I'm
to
sorry.
sign in.
Absolutely, I will. Yes. Thanks. Do you need an address? Thank you. Again, I'm Jack Knowles. I was here at the public hearing. I spoke at the public hearing. I was the person that brought forth the issue about the judgment, if you may recall. I agree with with the attorney. Not that I'm an attorney, but I agree that the board, of course, is the proper body that would address that issue. Any modification to that. This proposal goes against every planning document that you have. It goes against the existing master plan. It goes against the proposed future master plan. Those are the documents that municipalities are supposed to follow when rezoning and planning considerations come in front of you. This goes against everything that you people have said you stand for. It is not anticipated for commercial retail type uses in that strip between Burger King and the street to the east, which I can't remember that name.
Gary.
If they're not planning a car wash, why wasn't that included as an excluded use in their conditions? This is step one. Step two will be happening very shortly, and you will be faced with that, and you'll be hogtied to approve that. As long as they can meet the conditions that are required in the zoning ordinance, you will have yourself another car wash. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay. Any discussion amongst the commission?
I agree with the resident that just spoke. This conflicts with our future land use plan. It conflicts with our zoning ordinance. I don't see a reason to approve this. We're going to be going through our master plan in the coming months, and let's address this entire section at that time. But to go through and give one applicant this approval, I just don't think it's right. I think we're setting a precedent for the entire township if we ignore our job, which is the zoning ordinance and the master plan. So I feel very strongly opposing this.
And playing the devil's advocate now. So how do you feel that it conflicts with the plan?
Well, it's zoned office. The residents to the north bought their homes. Looking at the zoning ordinance and the master plan, said office. That's their buffer to Ann Arbor Road. Future land use plan says office.
So does the planner have any retort to that? I mean, do you agree? What's your professional opinion?
So I think my statement is the same as what you heard in September, which is that exclusive office districts are declining across the country, as you see in Livonia, Southfield, lots of other areas around Metro Detroit. And the idea of an office-only district is antiquated. Districts like ARC or industrial that allow office to be mixed in to other purposes are much more popular and respond better to the lack of demand for exclusive office. This, however, is not the only possible appropriate use for this site, right? Like I said, with the draft 2025 master plan, that currently has this site being considered for mixed use. So ARC may not be the most appropriate or highest and best use for this site, but in our professional review, it is more, beneficial than the current zoning of office, which has resulted in high vacancy along that strip.
Given that changing real estate market, would this be better addressed when we have a review of the master plan?
It's up to the applicant. The applicant can submit at any time, right? We can't control when they submit or when they want to. If you were to adopt the new master plan and then reconsider it, that would be fine, but you can't legally base it on a draft, right? You either choose to base it on the one that's adopted today or wait and then base it on the new one after it's been adopted. Does that make more sense? It's the same problem that you saw with the other proposed conditional rezoning of that dental office, right? Office is the hard one this year. Office is the hard one.
And that
And I
being-
should, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I also should say that, we focus a lot on the future land use map, I think, with most of our rezonings, because they do generally have to comply, but it's also important to read the text of the master plan and think about those other goals and objectives that are within it as well, especially when you are considering such a big change, like we saw in the decline of office overall, right? When you see a radical change like that in the market or in the land use pattern of our communities, then we have to look to the other portions of the master plan to help guide us.
I can see that, but I'm not convinced that office is going away. More and more companies are going back to work, having people come back in. So to, in essence, give up our zoning ordinance and our master plan because of a pandemic and what could be just a short-term issue of not having office, I can see a lot of different uses that would be great for that property, especially with the Henry Ford right across the street would be ideal for physical therapy, that type of business. So I think there's other options for office or for that site as it is. And I don't know that office is going away. I'm not convinced. And I'd really like to see us go through the next master plan and then really make it just like other areas in the township. I think we just really need to look at some of these areas and see what do we want, but not react to it, but just be proactive and plan it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I remember, I don't know how long you all have been here, but a while back it was considered to create a mixed-use district in the township. And I think going forward for sites like this, something that involves the mixing of uses with office as one of those principal options would probably be the most appropriate. But since we only have the master plan that we've adopted to legally rely on, that's the one that we have to use today.
So why do we have a process that allows for conditional rezoning?
State law provides for it.
Right, and why do they provide for it?
For special circumstances where the conditions could make the rezoning more appropriate in the context with the master plan.
With the master plan?
And also the neighboring area. So it's kind of a way to allow applicants to try to better match those rezoning criteria that we use by offering their own voluntary conditions. Does that make more sense? I feel like I might have phrased that confusingly. Okay.
Sure, if I may just add reference to our preference. And Commissioner Berry, your last question was extremely relevant. I was involved in the drafting of the statute on conditional rezoning. And one of the elements of that statute is, and one of the, if you were to go back and couldn't sleep at night, you wanted to read the actual floor debate, was around the fact that conditional rezoning does not have to comply with the master plan of the township. It was intended to deal with situations just like this, where in fact the master plan gets amended in responsible communities every 5 years. Too many communities, it's not every 5 years. but it's to deal with those uses that are in fact leading to the new master plan that kind of lead the way. And so we're kind of in this in-between place right now as it relates to that. So conditional rezoning was intended to allow the freedom of a community to say, hold it, someone can propose to us conditions to meet the concerns we have on this, even though it may not quite meet the master plan, it doesn't meet the zoning. It's a bit of a wild card, but it's one that we can put in writing in the zoning ordinance and then have it enforced like that. As to the comment about waiting on the master plan, I think the plan is correct. I think this use as proposed meets the spirit and intent of the language of the master plan, although it doesn't meet the picture of that as to the planning commission raises. And quite frankly, it's something we deal with in every project. Even in doing the Henry Ford project and the outlots, we had to deal with this concern as well. And so I think as it relates to the planning commission and the township, it ultimately comes down to the decision: do we want to try to help lead the way, or do you want to sit and look at that building and wait for some users? As it relates to concerns about prospective medical office users, I can tell you one part about that. With health systems consolidating, they are effectively absorbing in and in-house almost all those things. Medical office spaces are vacating as quickly as other office. I also happen to represent a guy named Stephen Ross and the related companies, the single largest office builder and affordable home builder in the country, in the world. And office is gone. I have projects approved, sitting there waiting for billions of dollars of financing that we cannot finance. We hope in a year or so we may be able to finance, but there is no office. And we look in this area with the office on the southwest corner of Haggerty and Ann Arbor that is struggling as well, and other offices. I would think, although it's always wise to leave the possibility of some office in the future, I think the question before you is there something you can do now to help make this attractive as it relates to leading to the future of the use? And so that's why we're there with this proposal tonight. So
It's a little off target here, but relevant.
yeah.
So there was a story actually on 60 Minutes this last weekend about office space in New York City. And right now there's 95 million square feet of office space that's vacant. And what do they do with that? Well, one of the things I've noticed is, well, they're converting some of that to apartments. So it's very similar to what Gilbert is doing in Detroit
Exactly.
with his office space. So I'm thinking that when we do have our meeting again on the master plan, I'm presuming we're going to have a discussion on offices and are they truly kind of going away or reducing, is what do we see as the future of those facilities in Plymouth Township?
What did you say, what Gilbert's doing?
He buy, like the book building, he's making apartments out of those.
Yeah,
That was an
there's a
office.
federal
That's not
tax
as
credit.
easy as it sounds, though.
Yeah, there's actually a federal tax credit rolling through to facilitate some repositioning of office asset into real estate or to residential. It's going to be interesting, but yeah, you'll see. I think you'll see that. I think you'll see some of that.
That's more difficult than it sounds.
Yes, yeah, the floor plates and structures they make it very interesting.
So I agree with your comment about the consolidation of the, hospital systems, and they're absorbing all these other offices. But for example, Commissioner Barberina's comment about something like physical therapy or some other auxiliary use. Now you're saying that you are thinking of producing,
That's gone now.
you're thinking of expanding into Ann Arbor Road. And you've talked to the veterinarian guy and all that, but have you talked at all to the Henry Ford people and see, what do they foresee as spin-offs that might occur in that area?
The owner has actually spent significant amount of time looking at prospective health-related users. What you're seeing, I think you've seen recently, the consolidation of health systems, and Henry Ford included and others. And unfortunately, that's not over. There's some other I've been on a major medical system board. I have a little insight, but there are more consolidations coming, and that's resulting in, quite frankly, a consolidation of physical space of these places as well. One of the newest urgent care facilities you saw open up on 275 in the last 9 months, I expect is going to go dark in 12 months. Because of these, they're trying to consolidate down their footprint and the way they deliver services. because they just, number one, they can't afford the physical footprint. Number two, they can't get the staff and people to actually facilitate these places anymore. And so it's all being pulled into lesser and lesser facilities. And so when you talk to a health system, they're not looking at renting space from anybody else right now. They're trying to figure out how to get rid of the physical space that they own. So we certainly explored that possibility, and with no avail and no hope in the next several years as they go through the consolidation of health systems. So.
Yeah, that was sort of discussion at a higher level, but it was important, I believe, to have that said, and so we can better understand long-term effects that might happen in that area. Any other concerns or questions or comments?
One other comment I wanted to bring up is that, just as a reminder, that at our last meeting about this application, I know we had one gentleman here tonight to speak on it, but we had a number of residents that live to the north that were very vocal and very upset about any type of commercial going into that spot, not just anything outside of office. So I just wanted to remind the commission of that.
Okay. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Come up and give us your name and be sure to sign in.
Jamie Burke, Quick Pass Car Wash. So my only concern is when I came to build a car wash in Plymouth, I was directed towards properties. I asked where we can build one. It was special land use. We had to get, the Denny's was dilapidated, was down. We looked up and down here. That building was there. It seemed like a nightmare to overcome zoning, right? And then somebody purchased the property without having rezoned it or got over the problems with this site. They, if it's zoned office, it's worth $400,000 or $500,000 an acre max. The L Car Wash bought it for like 2.6 million without approvals. In what world does that happen? It doesn't happen, but it happened here, right? And the guys to the west of that, or the east, those three big office buildings, they would like their $400,000 or $500,000 an acre land become $1 million an acre. And we spoke with them, and my business partner knows them very well. And as soon as you approve this, they're coming here for the same approval, so you guys know. They're waiting for this to get pushed through, and they're coming in because they want their value to go up as well. It isn't going to stop here. How about I just go pick a zoned office and then come in here and say, well, you just did it for them. You're going to do it for me, so I can make it quick. I can double my money on the land alone, right? So we talked about the car wash. Again, you can't pick winners and losers, but you're going to devalue my property. So you kind of are picking winners and losers, and you're going to devalue USA to Go's property because you're splitting the pie again, right? So I guess there's more to this than I see. I just can't see. I've been buying properties a while, and we bought another property in Novi, and we would not buy anything that was not zoned properly for a car wash, and we wouldn't pay for it before we had the approvals either. I've never heard of that. So just me personally, being local, it stinks. I don't like it. And you can call me crazy, but I'm not. So that's all I got.
I do have that concern as well, that it'll snowball and spread right down the street.
If I may respond, I thoroughly respect what he just had to say, but he's a user. My client's a developer. And so we take property and we try to figure out what you can do with it. And if I thought I was less than nuanced and a little bit more clear, but we know that this is the first part of what we anticipate to be a two-step process with this township. And we know that the township board, the first thing they have to do is agree to amend the consent judgment before we can actually get on to them accepting any recommendation on the rezoning of this site. While the township board and the planning commission is restricted from not trying to ask for additional conditions as it relates to this particular application, the township board is free to ask for any condition it wants when it comes to amending a consent judgment. So I expect there's going to be a hearty conversation when we show up and talk about a consent judgment amendment, probably around the car wash. And so I expect that there will be many opportunities to have that conversation in a legitimate fashion on both sides of the table as part of the overall development. So to his extent, to try to say you're just approving a car wash, I think we're really far from that possibility, quite frankly, based on the township's discretion in its choice to whether or not amend the consent judgment that's on the site. So,
Mr. Raymond, how do you respond to, if I may?
Yeah.
How do you respond to the gentleman's point about the other office buildings will be in here looking for the same conditional
Well, I'll tell you.
rezoning? Because,
yeah.
you know, my sense initially is that, okay, conditional rezoning is a process that's permitted, and looking at where things are at in the economy and office buildings and so forth, it seemed like a reasonable proposal to me under the circumstances. But then I hear the comments about the other office buildings. I think those are legitimate points. We don't want to set a precedent where we're all of a sudden everybody's coming in, then maybe Kendra has a legitimate point. We should review this under the master plan first.
A great question, thank you. I respond to it by saying, first, I think I'm not familiar. Whenever I deal with a project, I go walk around it, spend time around it, behind it. I did not walk around behind. I don't know how far the residences go to the office buildings towards the intersection or whatever. So I don't know if they're all the way to the extent of the wherever they go or whatever. But certainly Ann Arbor Road corridor is changing. And those owners may want to show up to you at some point and talk about the future, what the future looks like for them. I'll tell you though, while we are talking about the nature of a use here, you're also talking about a specific proposal that dramatically underutilizes the site. We are 5 times the distance of what we could right now with the current zoning go put an office building 35 feet from the rear property line. Your site plan requirements are such that we could drop a significant project on that site that neighbors would have no say in. We can meet with every site plan requirement. So what you are being asked to look at is a possibility of a project that over landscapes, over buffers, and significantly reduces the use of the site by the footprint of the building in a way that protects against the kinds of nuisance and impacts and concerns that would be inherent in the other zoning categories. And so, yeah, could they show up? Absolutely. I don't think those people are going to show up, but they might with a proposal that of 2,500 square feet versus the thousands of square feet of product they have sitting there right now. But they're closer to the freeway, and so who knows what they may want to show up with in the future on that. But if they want to come in with conditions to say, we're going to so dramatically buffer, we're going to pull the project away, we're going to limit the hours so they won't go past 9 p.m. at night and all these other things, then I think you're in a position to have a conversation. But it's your discretion as it relates to whether those meet it or not. So, yeah.
Other further comments or concerns?
I think the applicant has made a real legitimate effort to address some of the concerns with his site plan for the restaurant. I think it's for a restaurant usage, it's a pretty, pretty admirable proposal. The concern I had coming in here was that by rezoning this entire property, we then, I was questioning whether we lose the ability to be able to more directly control the issue with the car wash. Attorney Bennett, you confirmed my fears that we do lose control by rezoning the entire property in terms of our ability to reject the car wash. My recollection, which isn't always so great these days, I will admit, but I thought that the majority of concerns from the residents behind the property related to the car wash and the noise from the car wash and traffic rather than the restaurant. Remember concerns about the vacuum noise, the noise of the car wash machinery and so forth. So I think we have to look at this in its entirety and realize that it's not just the restaurant. If we approve this, we are setting ourselves up for a situation where it's very likely that the applicant could come forward with a car wash, and under the revised zoning, we would be less able to reject that use. I think I'm correct. Am I stating that correctly, Attorney Bennett?
I think so. What I would specifically say is that if the applicant later wants to, and this is all speculation on my part, I just want the board to be aware, or pardon me, the commission to be aware of what may unfold in the future. If the applicant later desires to put a car wash on that site, a car wash is a special use in the ARC district. If the applicant for the car wash fulfills the requirements of section 2.7 of the zoning ordinance, the commission will have the exclusive and mandatory duty to approve that if the applicant complies with the conditions set forth in 2.7. It will not be discretionary, and there is no appeal process. The planning commission has final say on special uses, as we learned from the Myers lawsuit.
Could I just add one dimension to that, though? The board won't get to that consideration until it first gets to a consideration of whether it wants to amend the consent judgment. Let me just put it as, I thought I put it pretty plainly, I'm gonna put it very plainly. I expect the board to say to us, it's because amending a consent judgment is entirely a discretionary act by a township board. I expect the township board to say to us, if you want us to amend the consent judgment, we want you to agree that there'll be a restriction on the property, there'll be no car wash. Then we'll talk about whether we're going to consider your rezoning application. So I think there's going to be future conversation about a car wash. And the board's in a pretty good position to kind of impose that request if we want to see the consent judgment amended. We can't do this project, the restaurant, without that consent judgment amended. We can't do anything on this without that consent judgment amended. So I think there is a conversation to be had at the board level at that point in time, and I will be very shocked if I don't hear the first thing out of the supervisor's mouth saying, you should be aware, there's going to be a request as a condition to the amending of the consent judgment, not the rezoning, but the consent judgment, that you agree that there will perpetually not be a car wash there. So I don't think anyone should be worried about a car wash in this site.
Can you then not place that as one of your limitations if you know that's going to be the case?
This is a process which there are steps to, and so the board always has to have its own conversations, and I've been involved in this for 35 years, and so I always want to be prepared. I'd like to have one card on my vest when we have that conversation.
Given that, I think we need to keep in mind that there's actually room for more than one business on this site, and that there's a part of the site that's being reserved for future development, which means that we could have not just this restaurant, but then adjacent to it, another retail or restaurant or non-office type business. So this is, like, we're really approving, if this goes through, the potential for two businesses that are in the Ann Arbor Road corridor and not office. So it's something to keep in mind for that too.
The other thing, and perhaps, Bob, you could comment on this, but I've heard a number of times the board say that they really trust the Planning Commission to come forward with recommendations that reflect all of the concerns and all the gritty detail maybe that board members don't have time to get into. So it's not that the board has never overturned our decisions, but my sense is that they really rely on us to sort of be their eyes and ears in terms of how they should react to future projects.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. That's exactly right.
It's our job.
And you're buying that? And you're buying that?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
I think so.
No, it's exactly, it's a point I think underscores particularly with, the part-timers that have limited amount of time to, they don't have the resources to dive into this the way we do. So they rely heavily. I know I always did, even before I was on the Planning Commission.
Ultimately, that decision, with the direction that this goes, rests with the Board of Trustees, because there are so many pieces to this puzzle, if you will, that we can't address. We don't have that authority where the Board of Trustees do.
There's an extra layer of the consent judgment and what the Board of Trustees does with it. So that's different, but also to be devil's advocate, can we base all of our decisions on speculation on what a property owner might do in the future? I mean, they might tear down the current building, like the applicant said, and put up something else that would be equally as unattractive to the neighbors, or even more unattractive to the neighbors.
I don't, and it's a good point you're making. I don't think, we can speculate on everything, but what you're saying is the message to the people that object is be careful what you wish for, because they can come in the next day and do something that you would you would have preferred they did the first thing rather than the second thing, right? But I think the point that Kevin made is really important because it's possible, we have to take into consideration that anything that is a permitted special use would be eligible if we were to rezone that property. So that's a longer list of things. Car wash is one thing that, jumps out, but there's other things on there that we may not, find so desirable.
So that's not speculation because that's in the
Yeah, they
ordinance,
can
and it's
come in.
allowable with a special land use permit, as
mean,
long as they meet the qualifications for
Case
that.
in point, I'll use the example of the charter school where, the neighbors weren't careful what they wished for and they didn't want 31 homes and now they're getting a charter school,
A high school
high school,
with a football field.
with a football field.
Well, it's gonna be K through 12 eventually.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It was actually, I think, 38 homes. I think the 31 homes would have gone through, but that's just my own view.
Yeah,
But
So-
still, your point's a valid one.
yeah.
So let me ask, so for a conditional rezoning, okay, if that is a process that is permitted, wouldn't that be the situation with every conditional rezoning? That is, that if you approve it for whatever the limited purpose that they're bringing to you, you're also effectively approving it for other purposes. Wouldn't that be the case in every conditional rezoning request?
Unless the applicant strictly regulated it to one use, which does happen occasionally.
Okay, I guess my point to that is, okay, so then if that's the case, I want to look at the conditional rezoning and not speculate too much about other things that might go in there. And I think it's more appropriate to focus in on what is being proposed. That's
So
my feeling about it.
to rephrase your question, I think, is what is the difference between, legally, what is the difference between a conditional rezone and an outright rezone? Right?
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So what is the difference?
The difference is that to the extent the applicant lists conditions that it will not put forth as a proposed use, which in this case are schools for arts and crafts, private clubs and lodge halls, mortuaries, churches, temples, and similar places of worship, bus stations, commercial parking garages, and public schools. Those will not be allowed, even if they are allowed in the ARC district as a special or permitted use. That they cannot be used for those uses under this proposal. But anything that's not listed as a condition and is listed as a permitted or a special use in ARC is fair game. The
And,
criteria are different, obviously, for a permitted use and a special use.
and, along with that, you're also considering the dimensional restrictions that this applicant is proposing, right? The additional buffering, the setbacks, the overall design of the site. So for example, if the neighboring site were to come to you and say, hey, I want to rezone to ARC, no conditions, you'd say, well, you don't have restrictions on your hours of operation. You don't have better landscaping. You don't have these elements that were included as voluntary conditions. So there would be a different context in which you'd review, a plain rezoning versus a conditional rezoning. Does that make more sense? Yeah. And again, it's up to the commission to decide if those conditions meet the criteria for a rezoning, right? If they meet the intent of the zoning ordinance and the master plan. And that would be true of every case.
I mean, I think we do have the added layer for this property of the consent judgment having to be approved by the Board of Trustees. With no discretion, they have complete discretion, right?
Yeah, that
You know what, that
provides more
on its face,
leverage.
that sounds plausible and logical, but this is such a unique situation that I don't want to say for certain that the township board's options are unlimited. I mean, is there interplay between section 405 of the Zoning Enabling Act and the township's power under a consent judgment? That's a pretty specific issue, and I have not looked into that yet.
Complicated.
Yeah. Also, just the conditions the applicant is proposing are just for the restaurant site. So the other half of the site is not under the, if I'm reading this correctly, is not under the restriction of placing the building 150 feet from the back, from the line with the residential properties. So, you know, we have to realize that we're not just looking at the drive-in, which again, as I said, I think is now well laid out in consideration. We have to look at the other site, and if I'm reading this right, those restrictions don't apply to the other half of the site. Is that correct?
I don't think it is.
So the landscape buffering, for example, does apply to the entirety of the site.
Right, but I'm speaking to the setback of the properties, the buildings.
The building would have to comply with the setbacks that are demonstrated in the site plan that you received, so.
But even the potential building in the future development.
I don't think the site plan had any sort of information on the other half of the property other than just where some of the gas mains were and that sort of information.
It does include a 75-yard front setback through the entire duration of the property, including the future development phase.
75 yards or 75 feet?
From Ann Arbor Road, yes.
I'm talking about the setback versus the residential properties behind.
Oh, you mean the rear setback? No, so you're correct. The rear setback is applying to the proposed restaurant only, the 106-foot one, yes.
So just, again, playing this out, the applicant could come forward with the plan for the other half of the site, and the car wash being a relatively long, narrow piece of property, could very well come in with the car wash piece of it, not having these same setbacks that drive-in does, in terms of where it relates to where the residential properties are behind, just so we're clear.
Yes, I think that's a good point. The conditions offered for rezoning have to be in writing, and they are presented on this piece of paper right here. These apply to the entire parcel. The site plan is going to only apply to a specific portion of the parcel. So the requirements of that site plan, to the extent that they're more extensive than what's in the conditions offered for rezoning, are limited to that part of the parcel.
So it's a pretty long list. I have it up on the screen of things that would be special uses. First, permitted uses within the ARC, and then second, what the special land uses. I'm not going to read it all, but it's pretty long, pretty lengthy.
And it's important to remember with all special land uses in any district, the commission may impose conditions on a special land use. So you can't do that on a conditional rezoning, but on a special land use, you are allowed to impose conditions on hours of operation, on lighting, on landscaping layout, anything that is necessary to reasonably abate a nuisance. So, and that's true for any special land use, and you have done that in the past.
Are there any other comments? So, Commissioner Boyd, are you still looking to make an additional comment, or?
No, sir.
No. Okay, well, are we ready, or should we have more discussion?
I'm ready to make a motion unless someone else does. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to the Board of Trustees the denial of PC application number 2493, conditional rezoning of 40700 Ann Arbor Road to the ARC Ann Arbor Road Corridor District for the following reasons. 1, it conflicts with provision number 2 of the zoning ordinance and is not consistent with the future land use map of the 2015 master plan, which shows the site to be Ann Arbor Road Corridor Office, the residential medium density plan to the north, and Ann Arbor Road Corridor Office to the east and west. 2, this application conflicts with provision number 5 and is not consistent with the zoning classifications to the north, which is R1, single-family residential, nor to the east or west, which is OS ARC Office Services. 3, the 2015 master plan is the only plan that has been both reviewed by the public and adopted by the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. The 2025 master plan is still in draft form and has not been adopted. 4, granting this conditional rezoning will set a precedent in the township for granting requests that conflict with the future land use designation of the master plan. And 5, the residents living to the north of the property purchased homes in good faith that they would have an office zoning classification as a buffer between their homes and Ann Arbor Road. That's all.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Barberina and supported by Commissioner Dorchevitz. Do you have that written down? I just want to review it again.
Want to do a roll call vote on this?
Yeah, we'll do a roll
Okay.
call. Just give me a
Yeah,
minute to
yeah.
look at this.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, all right, we'll do a roll call vote. So this is to deny, so if you.
Recommending denial.
Recommend to deny. So if your vote is yes, you agree with the denial. If you vote no, you disagree. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Do I normally just start from the top and go down? Or do I go in order for a roll call?
I don't care.
You don't care? Commissioner Barry?
I'm going to vote. This is a difficult one. Again, as a newer member, I struggle with, these issues, and I tend to want to defer to my colleagues who have more experience, but I'm going to vote no on this one. I think that the proposal was specific enough and detailed enough to meet the requirements of a conditional rezoning in this instance. And while I'm concerned about the precedents, I think there are some additional layers of vetting that are going to take place with the board. I think for our part as commissioners, I think as laid out by the planner, I think, they have met the conditions for a conditional rezoning. So for that reason, I'm voting no.
Treasurer Dorchevitz?
Yes.
Commissioner Barberina?
Yes.
Chairperson Zwolski?
I vote no. I believe that, well, not necessarily, there's a lot of issues related to this that I have grave concern. I think this proposal or application has got a lot of other elements that are beyond the commission's control. And I think that they can be better addressed by a more authoritative figure or organization, which is the Board of Trustees.
So Secretary Grieger, while I don't think that this is maybe the most appropriate mechanism for addressing the issue of what the use should be for particular pieces of property in the township that maybe are zoned in a way that has changed, I agree that the applicant has met the criteria, so I am going to vote no. Commissioner Boyd?
This is a tough one, very tough to call. I have the overriding concern is what would happen with the other half of the property, so I will vote yes.
And Commissioner Ladowick?
So as even a newer board member than Commissioner Barry, I too have concerns that, as Commissioner Boyd says, that there's problems with the other half of the property. and what could happen to the east and west of this property and other places. But I also agree with Commissioner Grieger that I don't think we are not here to judge on what's going to happen in the future, basically. But what we're seeing from our applicant is, I believe, in my little knowledge of been on this board, I believe he's done very well, and I will vote no.
Wow. Wow.
So 4-3,
So it begins.
the motion fails.
No, the motion does not.
Technically,
Motion
the motion failed.
The motion failed.
Yes,
Yes.
the motion failed.
Correct.
So you can make a new motion that is the inverse, or send the failed motion on to the Board of Trustees.
Is that procedurally what we need to do? It doesn't,
I would make the inverse motion to make the minutes line up better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what the zoning ordinance requires is a specific recommendation from the commission to the board.
So the board would see the roll call vote either way, right? The board will get the full minutes, but they do need a successful motion of some sort.
Well, I can't, I never liked
And that
So on the
motion,
handout, the bullet points under conclusions on page 5, the 2 bullet points at the top are the 2 options. And we explored option 2, and 4 of you voted wrong.
and the alternative motion would also need findings of fact, correct?
Yes, any motion.
Very precise findings of
must.
fact.
Nani, can we use the planner's finding of fact and incorporate those into the motion?
Yes,
So we don't have to
you may if you wish.
recreate the wheel here?
Yeah, if you agree with them.
Okay.
Okay, so, does anyone want to make the motion?
Do I make the motion?
Okay,
I can,
I'll give it a go.
okay, good.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend the approval to the Board of Trustees for the conditional rezoning request from the OS-ARC Office Services Ann Arbor Road Corridor District to the ARC Ann Arbor Corridor District. I make this recommendation to the chairman based on the findings of the planner that this site meets the site plan and special land use requirements, that it would still require a successful resolution of the existing consent judgment by the Board of Trustees, and that it's consistent with the resolution of the master plan office designation in 2024 by the Planning Commission.
May I interject?
Yes, you may. I think
Okay.
you wanted me to not.
That's okay, that you just read, you read the items that were originally proposed as conditions, which
that were
we
being
can't,
removed. I
can't
got you.
do, so,
I got
so you may want to start that motion over
Let me
again.
start that motion over.
Yep, so,
Got the scratch
Yeah,
offs.
I got it.
yeah,
Okay.
and these are the findings, again, recommended by Laura in her
Right,
original
okay.
letter.
So
So withdraw that.
let me strike my former recommendation. Mr. Chairman, I am recommending that we approve the conditional rezoning request of the
We
applicant.
recommend approval.
Pardon?
We recommend approval.
Is that not what I said? That's what I
You just
thought I
said that we approve, but we.
I recommend that we approve.
Right, exactly.
No,
No other way around.
You're recommending.
an approval by the
That the Board
board.
of
By the board,
Trustees, that
right.
we. No, I'm all tongue-tied, I just want you.
Join the crowd.
Let me try again, okay. Mr. Chairman, it is my recommendation that we approve of the request to have the, no, okay. I'm going to let somebody else take this.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval to the Board of Trustees for the rezoning of 40700 Ann Arbor Road to the ARC zoning from the Ann Arbor Road corridor office services based upon the finding of facts of the planner that is contained in their report. You want me to read those into the record?
No, because you quoted it.
Yeah, yeah. Good enough?
I think it is.
Well, I support that.
Okay. All right, you want to do it?
Yeah.
So again, now here, if you vote yes, you're recommending approval. And if you vote no, then you're voting to deny it. All right, so.
I'll start at this end, this
Okay.
time. Commissioner Ledwick,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
No,
Secretary Grieger, yes. Chairperson Cebulski?
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Barberina,
No.
Treasurer Dorshevitz,
No,
and Commissioner Barry.
Yes.
Okay. So that's 4-3, motion carries.
Okay. All right, well,
Thank you very
Enjoy
much
your Board of
for all your,
Trustee meeting.
yeah. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, sorry for that.
No, it's confusing when you're doing a double negative, you know? It's very
and
confusing,
it's good that we're clear about it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really.
yeah, I thought it was.
and at the Board of Trustees, everything on the agenda has proposed motions as far as agenda packet, so all you do is read it.
Yeah.
I know. It's hard because Kendra had it, right? You did a great job. I could tell. Brutal.
Yeah, without,
Okay, moving on to application 2460, the Elmore Building Expansion Site Plan Approval Extension. Ms. Wolf, you have anything you want to add to?
Thank you, everyone. So for the benefit of the public and anyone watching at home, the PC number 2460, the Elmore Building, has requested an extension to their site plan approval. So on January 18th of this previous year, the Planning Commission granted final site plan approval for an expansion to the existing engineering facility at 43939 Plymouth Oaks Boulevard. And their site plan is set to lapse on January 18th, tomorrow, and they're requesting the 1-year extension that is provided for under the zoning ordinance. Does anyone have any questions?
Are you the applicant? Oh. What did you, oh, do you have anything to add, or? Oh, okay, all right. All right, any questions from the commission? Okay, is there a motion to,
Mr. Chairman, I move to grant a 1-year extension to PC application number 2460, the Elmore Building Expansion, by which the applicant has until January 18th, 2025 to finalize approvals with Township and close out the site plan process.
support.
moved by Commissioner Barberina and supported by Commissioner Boyd to grant the 1-year extension to application 2460. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sure, thank you.
Thank you for staying.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Next is miscellaneous business, to receive and file the monthly planning report. So, do you have anything to add to the report or comments?
So first of all, there's a slightly new report format that you'll notice. We're going to try to add a project spotlight and a little more visual interest to our reports each month. I know at the end of the day, it's just a big table of what we're doing, but either way, we're going to try to spice it up, yeah, to the best a government can, to get people maybe a little more interested in reading it. So the project spotlight this week is the St. John's Town's PUD. They have not yet come back for their revised submission, but still the project spotlight of the day. The next thing I want to highlight is we have a note in here about the Sarah Fund Automotive site. So as you know, we're still working with the applicant to understand the uses that he is proposing. And we're also researching the prevalence and conditions of those uses by other automotive users in the area. So, at the previous meeting, there were questions about, are other minor automotive shops providing these services? And our department is looking into that for all automotive shops in a 3-mile radius. So it's taking some time, but we are doing our due diligence on those items. So just wanted to let you know where that one stands right now. Then there are some other items in here that you probably saw. The conditional rezoning for 49331 North Territorial, which is the dental office that you saw is officially withdrawn. It's not going on to the Board of Trustees, so it's just been permanently withdrawn. And
Did they give any reason?
just,
Anything?
I think the prospect of success at the board was slim, given the planning commission's overall judgments and feelings on the site, so they just withdrew, right?
Some like
sale.
questions about.
It's for sale.
They've listed the site.
Yeah, yep.
All right.
And they were advised that that was a possibility from the beginning. You know, everyone is allowed to submit for whatever they want, and they did, but I think they saw the future of that application, so. Then the only other ones that I think we should draw your attention to are we have a land combination and a minor administrative review. So we're gonna start adding in those administrative items so that you guys can see them. That was a request from last time. So land combinations and minor reviews that don't necessarily come to the commission, we're gonna summarize in the report for you so that you have questions on them or just wanna know about them, you can ask us.
Would that include land splits?
Yes, unless they are subdivision size. So if someone splits a bunch of parcels simultaneously as a subdivision, that still comes to you. But this is, those administrative ones.
So the land combination at Beck and Ann Arbor, is that where there was a house and it was torn down, that parcel?
It's the vacant corner, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if you look at the Beck and Ann Arbor intersection, it's the northwest corner. And a gentleman wants to build a single home on there, so
Really?
combining the two makes sense. Yep.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, you go first.
Is Taco Bell finished with their renovations?
They haven't even started.
There was,
You mean the construction?
yeah,
They're finished with their minor renovations. So next year, they're planning to come back with the whole big new Taco Bell, like the modernist Taco Bell. But they're done with their minor ones.
okay, yeah, I saw
That
that
was just
going
the
on.
interiors, right? The minor one. They
Yeah.
didn't do anything with the facade or
I
the.
think they're gonna repaint it, or maybe they did repaint it and I haven't even noticed yet. But they didn't materially change anything, they're just gonna change the paint job.
Okay, so it was the inside that they were working on? So I saw trucks there and.
Yeah, and a little bit of landscaping too, freshening it up, that sort of stuff. But the big one will be coming next year, as long as their corporate structure holds.
Okay, thank you.
Nani, am I missing it, or the Meyer project's not on here? Is that because it's,
So that's because it's no longer within the purview of our department or the planning commission,
okay.
so.
Bob, is there any update that you can share with us?
Let's see. Kevin, what can I share with them?
Oh, maybe I should have asked you, Kevin.
Smile over there. Until the judgment is entered, I'd be leery.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't talk about it.
Okay. And then the other one is North Hill Downs. Is there any?
Kevin, what can I share with them?
Only because Dave and I are both on the board of the Plymouth Chamber of Commerce. And
Breakfast?
no, there is a breakfast, yes, at St. John's, so you're all invited to come. But I want to know what officially is true and what's not, because there's a lot of stuff circulating around.
That's why you're asking.
That's why I'm asking.
I can make a statement on behalf of the planning department, which is their PUD option will expire soon. So their
Okay.
PUD option was approved roughly a year ago. If they do not make continued progress on the site plan, that will expire and they will have to reapply.
Okay.
If you didn't read the local newspaper last week, I would recommend reading the local
Yeah.
newspaper.
But
Which one?
from the planning commission's
Social housing,
perspective,
social.
So any extension though, does that go to the Board of Trustees and not the Planning Commission?
for the PUD option, yes, that would go to the board.
Yeah, I know, but I usually get it through Facebook, so, okay. Okay.
I have a question though on what we had just talked about, the land combination, the back road one. So there's two residential parcels, so where is the one right on the corner, but where is the second one?
Where would the access be, Beck or Ann
No,
Arbor?
I mean, the part that's empty right now, is that considered two parcels?
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
it
That
is?
whole vacant property is actually two smaller parcels. And originally, I think somebody had been considering doing two homes on it, but it's a very strangely sloped site, and honestly, you don't want to put driveways that close to Ann Arbor Road, right? So by combining them, you give yourself the option to put your driveway further away from the intersection and, have some more developable area.
Might have liked the trees.
Yeah, the trees are nice there.
Before they were, no, it was all treed.
Oh, I thought you meant the ones that are still there.
Yeah, if only they were still there is what I meant.
There's a couple.
Well, there were a couple that I think that got
Right,
blown
but way
down.
back. I'm talking go back 10, 15 years when the trees
Oh.
were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were more trees, but the owner, when there was a house there, had a garden, but it was sort of shady. I always wondered how well his produce did, because there wasn't much sun.
We'll call it the shady garden property.
Okay, any other questions on the monthly report?
Yes, Nani, when we discussed the St. John's PUD townhome proposal,
Yep.
there were some open questions about the planner's recommendation that the builder extend the sidewalk all the way up to 5 Mile Road. There were questions about whether the right-of-way was owned by Wayne County or by St. John's. And there was also a question, I believe, from Commissioner Berry as to whether there was any precedent for the Planning Commission asking for a property owner to extend a sidewalk on property that was not owned by the property owner. Do we have any updates on either of those questions?
So the second one, I think, was a question for Kevin in particular. Kevin, do you remember if we settled on an answer for that? If we didn't, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Can you
Yeah.
repeat the second part of the question?
Yeah, it was, there was a question from Commissioner Berry, if I recall correctly, that asked if there was any precedent in the past for the township or situation where the township asked an applicant to extend a sidewalk on property that he did not own. In other words, the thought being that the Pulte people own that property, but they're asking, the planner was asking them to extend the sidewalk all the way to 5 Mile, and that property was not their property.
Who owns the property?
St. John's,
That was the first
which is
part of the question.
Pulte,
That
but
was
it's
the first question. Is
a
it Wayne
different-
County or is it St. John's? Is it part of the road easement for Sheldon, from Wayne County, or is it St. John's?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a fact question.
Okay,
If it is in the road easement, then it would be Wayne County. If it's not in the road easement and it's on property owned by St. John's, then that would be something that would be St. John's responsibility.
so there's no precedent you know of where, in the past, where the planner asked a applicant to extend a sidewalk on property that the applicant did not own?
I'm not going to say that's without precedent. I can't recall anything off the top of my head.
So
I'm
I
sure
can-
we couldn't unilaterally do that without.
Yeah, you can't unilaterally do that, but a PUD public benefit can be off-site as long as it's reasonably related. So if you remember the Elks Lodge PUD, right, they paid for the repaving of that northern roadway, which they do not own, but has a reasonable connection to the impacts of that PUD. So you couldn't say, propose to add a sidewalk along Ann Arbor Road, which is totally unrelated from the St. John's site and very far away and has no reasonable connection at all. But if it has a reasonable nexus to the site, the public benefit could be, off-site but nearby. Does that make more sense?
I guess.
Yeah, in terms of the legal conditions of that specific property, Kevin and I will have to look into that more. But there is the opportunity for public benefits to be nearby, if not literally on the site.
But the property would have to be under the
Yeah, so in that case.
control of the
yeah,
applicant.
Or Wayne County. So in that case, that road that Elks Lodge PUD is repaving is owned by the county, and that is under county jurisdiction. So that's just what we have to figure out. We're also just waiting for the applicant to see if they want to return and offer that sidewalk, right? They can continue forward with their application without proposing a sidewalk at all. That's the recommendation at this time. But they could, for example, you could recommend denial of the development plan, and they would still go onto the Board of Trustees, right? So in this case, we're waiting for the applicant to see what they do propose. They might propose something totally different, right? They can revise their proposal.
Yeah, I'm still unclear in the first part. Do we know if that land is part of the Wayne County road easement, or is it possible that that land is actually St. John's?
I think the road easement goes 60 feet on either side of the middle of the road.
60, it's 33 on either side, I thought. Oh, no, wait, you're right, it's 60.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but 33 is ringing a bell.
Anyway, point is, we still have to figure that portion out. But we are also waiting, aside from the issue of who owns that property, we're waiting to see if the applicant would even move forward with that as a public benefit. They might not want to.
Is your question satisfied? Okay. Any other questions on the zoning, the monthly zoning report? How about the annual? Did you want to do a lead-in on the discussion on that?
That is after election of officers.
Oh, okay. All right. So, Ms. Wolf, did you get any folks that indicated to you that they were interested in any of these positions?
Nope, nobody has indicated differently. So if you're happy with the same ones, that's the proposal for
I'm
today.
ecstatic.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to that popcorn you were drinking.
Yeah, where's the
Bob?
popcorn, man?
Did you see that? You know what I was referring to?
No.
Is that what,
At the Iowa
Iowa
caucus, they were
caucus.
showing, at one of the caucus sites, they had the votes were on handwritten pieces of paper, and they put them in popcorn buckets.
Oh.
And it was,
Oh, okay.
we thought you were bringing popcorn as
Yeah,
a
so did
snack.
I. We walked in expecting that butter smell.
you got the joke or you didn't get the joke?
I got the joke.
Yeah.
Kendra, are you still happy as the vice chairperson? You're the only person I didn't hear from.
What about happy? I'm just kidding. Just have to say happy. It's fine.
All right, so is there a nomination for chairperson?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Dennis Sabowski to be our chairperson. I think he's done an exemplary job for a very long time.
Okay.
Fantastic.
I
hands
support that.
down.
Okay. thank you.
Absolutely.
Support.
Okay, so moved and supported to nominate myself. All in favor? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, but I abstain. And nominations for vice chair?
Mr. Chairperson, I nominate Kendra Barberina for vice chair, who's also done an exemplary job for all her years on the planning commission. Thank you very much for your service.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Grieger and supported by Commissioner Boyd to nominate, what's your name? Kendra Barberina for vice chairperson. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
And I'll abstain.
Okay. And secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we nominate, or I nominate Gail Grieger as our secretary. She has done a fantastic job, and we're so glad that she's doing it.
You're very glad
I
that
know
I'm doing
I
it.
am. After years of doing both, thank you very much.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Barberina, supported by Commissioner Boyd to nominate and approve the secretary position to Gail Grieger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Okay, motion carries.
Last year I was elected when I wasn't here.
I know.
Right. Notice everyone is here tonight.
All right, now we can move on to the review of our annual report. So, Ms. Wolf, did you want to lead?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very excited. But under state of Michigan law, every planning commission has to prepare an annual report on its activities, and that report goes to the Board of Trustees to demonstrate what has happened over the past year. And I want to commend you all for 2023 because you had 16 meetings in 2023, and you guys have done a really great job. Many of the other commissions that I work with had the minimum 4, and you had 16, quadruple that. So I think it reflects the busyness of Plymouth Township and also your dedication as public servants. So thank you all for that. We also did note that John Itzel is retired this year. So as you know, for some of you who may have been taking a seat that was vacated earlier this year, he is noted in the membership of 2023, and we thank him for his service. And the resolution honoring him has been delivered, just so you all know. But yeah, and then a lot of the annual planning program is following state guidelines of that we have to report on every single project that has come before you. So you'll see here in 2023, we have a list of special land use applications, site plan applications, rezonings, and cluster housing options, and PUDs. There were no CHOs this year, just PUDs that have come before the commission. So I think this summarizes just how much you have reviewed this year. There have been a lot of things coming across your plate, and a lot of really major applications as well, right? The Northville Downs, the Meyer property, you've really seen some big things this year. The other thing I noted in here is that we did have 2 applications that are preempted by state law. These are applications that do not come before the commission One is the Ivywood Classical School on Ridge Road. That is because it's a publicly funded school, not subject to local zoning. And the other one is a Verizon small cell wireless facility on Ann Arbor Road. Because it's within the county right-of-way, it's under county jurisdiction and not subject to local zoning.
Where
So
is that on Ann Arbor Road?
46081 is kind of right in front of Pioneer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually attached to an existing pole. It's not a new pole. If it was like a big new tower, it would come to the commission. But it's kind of just I'm not a tech person, but it's a piece of equipment that's fixed to the pole, basically.
That's 5G, or is that what that is?
So small cell wireless doesn't have a specific bandwidth assigned to it. It's just a piece of equipment. So it could be 5G, it could be 3G. It's really up to the Communications Commission, the Federal Communications Commission on that.
Did you say that was on Pioneer's property?
It's in the road right of way,
In the
actually,
road
right?
right
So it's in
okay.
county property.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why it didn't come to the commission. If it was on commission property, it would, or if we were a city and we owned our roads, it would come before you. But since we're not a city and the county owns all the roads, it goes to the county.
Okay.
But those were the only two applications that were preempted this year by state law. So those are the only two that didn't come across your desk. And I'd just like to mention those because I know you guys get questions about, why didn't the Planning Commission review Ivywood and those sorts of things. So we like to mention them anyway. And then we also did note the administrative reviews that were done this year. So we had 31 signs that came through, 4 of which came to the Planning Commission. We had 10 landscape inspections, 11 minor administrative reviews. That's things like, gatehouses, concrete pads for tanks, those things that are too small to come to the commission, and then 13 land divisions and combinations. And you did 2 zoning ordinance text amendments this year. Ultimately, the board was the approving body for those, but you were very valuable in your information on land divisions and solar energy systems. I think both of those took a lot of thought. And I know we didn't get to parking this year, but we can hope to get back to the parking next year. We started that a long time ago, and as this report reflects, lots of other things flooded in to fill up your time in basically every agenda. So, yeah, and then looking ahead in 2024, a lot of these are the same as the items that were planned for 2023 because, there were so many applications this year, we didn't get to all those backup items. But one of them is the modernization of the zoning ordinance, things like updating the parking standards, the landscaping standards, industrial heights, subdivision gates, all those other things that we had on the back burner in 2023 but didn't actually get to. And then we also have on the goal for 2024, the master plan adoption, which has been taking, I think, 3 years at this point. And part of that was the pandemic, but we really like to get that done in 2024. Goal is before the end of December, in part because it's called the 2025 Master Plan. If we can't adopt it by 2025, we'll have to change the title of it. So, but yeah, and the other goal for 2024 is to have at least one joint meeting. So we haven't had a joint meeting with the Board of Trustees since 2021. Joint meetings are really important for coordination purposes, also just to have an understanding of the division of powers. So having one of those would be very valuable in 2024. And it does depend on scheduling, but that is still a goal.
Last time we did that, one of the commissioners quit after the meeting.
Yeah,
Wasn't it during
it's
the
a bit of
meeting?
a risk.
Immediately after, I think.
And I might suggest if it should happen in '24, it should probably happen after the election.
Probably.
Because it would be a shame
Yeah.
to have the meeting and then
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So that's in the broad plan, and if there is a joint meeting, probably the best thing to do at that time is a joint training, so that it's not just an ambiguous talking session where no one knows what to do, because that can happen.
Have Kermit talking at you.
Nani, is the course from the Michigan State Extension available to the new commissioners?
So I have to check. I don't think the funding carried over from the last year for that course, but I'll check.
I don't think it was requested, but we
Yeah.
might be able to find the money.
Yeah,
It
we'll
was
have to check.
really,
it's really
it was
valuable.
really valuable.
Yeah, we definitely didn't request the
I
carryover,
agree.
like
It
you
was
said.
very,
It was very helpful.
Yeah,
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, we'll see if we can figure that out for you guys.
yeah, we probably can.
So my other question for you, in looking ahead for 2024, is about training in particular. Are there any topics that you would like to see training sessions on in the next year, whether that's flooding, brownfields, office space, anything that you want to address, or even division of powers between the Planning Commission and the ZBA, right? It's all those sorts of things about land use and development are on the table for training options. either from us or we'll find one that's appropriate for you, like MSU.
I think I was going to raise this up when we were going to have our master plan review meeting, but I would like to hear about what other communities might be doing with the reuse of some buildings. So I've been hearing several times now,
Okay.
Office space. And so what would happen to those buildings? How could they be redeveloped into something that is more relevant to the current situation?
So adaptive reuse.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I can look into that one. I know it was brought up a question about school sites as well, so we could try to get both of those.
What was the second one, Nani?
Oh, school sites and office buildings are really the main two adaptive reuse topics right now, so I'll just put both
On
of
the
those down.
division of power thing, that would be helpful. What I found helpful out of that training, one of the things was the, understanding do's and don'ts. I know we had some issues, not with the planning commission, but with, on the ZBA in the past, where ZBA members would go out and talk to the property owners.
Okay,
And, that's really, it's ex parte and it's not a good idea.
so ethics and conflict of interest, do's and don'ts. Okay,
Yeah. No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay.
But some of the stuff that learned out of there about, lines to, boundaries, I guess.
that's a good idea.
Well, that's a good point, Bob. I'm wondering if this sort of joint meeting would happen, would it include the ZBA members?
If you're doing an ethics training, I think it should. It should include as many boards as possible, especially boards that make, concrete development decisions.
Well, ethics training and also the division of powers.
I would love for that to include the Board of Trustees as well, since they are the final step in the development process, but I think Commissioner Grieger may be right that waiting till after the election for that one is important.
This year, but I didn't say that.
I know.
Having served on both the ZBA and the Planning Commission, I think it would be helpful to both groups to hear how our Board of Trustees see some of these major issues we have coming down the road. So my vote would be to include both of the groups.
Yeah, I think it should be the
question of
trustees
finding
and the
the time,
ZBA and the planning commission.
But after.
We have 16
After
minutes.
the election.
You
Exactly.
have a ton more.
Pardon?
I said we had 16 minutes, you had a lot more.
I know.
Any other topics that anyone is interested in?
Nani, I had a couple of comments. First, just a minor typo on page.
Oh, sure.
Let's see here, I think it's page 4. Yeah, under the map amendment rezoning applications, the first one listed 40700 Ann Arbor Trail.
Thank
Should be
you.
Ann Arbor Road.
Yes.
And then on the last page, this, I do want everybody to kind of listen in on this. I'm looking ahead in planning zoning in 2024. I have a couple of concerns. First of all, down at the bottom of the first column, it suggests that we would be scheduled to have the master plan adopted in April of 2024. In preparing for the meeting that we're going to have on the 29th, I read through the master plan, and since it was written in 2021, there's actually been quite a number of changes. So we're going to have to update, the text in various areas to reflect developments like Courthouse Grill and the Elks property and so on and so forth. Update the sidewalk map. So I'm worried that we might not be giving ourselves enough time. The second concern relates to the first, and that's the second to bottom bullet on the left side. It says, develop and complete a complete streets policy in partnership with the LC. The complete streets policy has a number of elements to it, and one of those elements in particular I don't agree with. But I think that we as a planning commission should discuss that issue and make sure that at least we understand what a complete streets policy is and make sure that it's something that the majority of the members want. Likewise, on the second column on the right, the second bullet down, go all the way there, says develop standards for missing middle housing and incorporate these into appropriate zoning districts. Missing middle housing is in my opinion, a contentious issue. It's one that it will be very central, I think, to our discussion on the 2025 master plan. And again, there's elements of it that personally I'm concerned with, but I think it needs to reflect the view of the board as a whole. And keeping in mind in this, that I think 4 or 5 of us are serving on the board, were not on the board when the 2021 draft was completed. And at the very least, those members need to be brought up to date on what missing middle housing is and have a chance to voice their view. So it would be I would have, I guess what I would recommend on this for consideration is that we say that it's scheduled to be adopted maybe in the first half of 2024 to give ourselves some time to talk through these issues. And if we need to go forward with this paper right now, I would recommend we delete the point on complete streets policy and delete the point on major missing middle housing until we have a time to discuss those as a planning commission and come to a consensus about what those represent. So those are my comments.
So what is a complete streets policy?
Yeah, so I also want to back up. These bullet points were carried over from 2021 each year because they didn't get done. And these are just items in the draft plan. So what we could do is revise this whole bulleted paragraph to just say, implement the projects once the plan is adopted, right? That's what it's supposed to mean when we have these sampling of things. The other thing to note is that your work plan is not legally binding. I just want to put that out there. You don't have
I'm
to
sorry,
do the
say it
thing.
again.
I said your work plan is not legally binding. You don't have to do the things in there. So I just don't want you to worry
There's
too
no
much
jail
about that.
time for not doing it.
But we can,
But come on, guys,
Yeah.
I mean.
we can like condense that to just say, work on implementation of plan when adopted. You know what I mean? Like rephrase that so that, because
I think
to
we
be
need to
honest-
give ourselves a reasonable target to perform to, but I think we also need to make sure we deliver on that target, so.
yeah. But
I
think-
know I'm not going to jail, Bob, but, I just want to make sure we have realistic goals.
But to answer your question about a complete streets policy, so a complete streets policy is usually a policy or resolution that's adopted by the Board of Trustees, but the Planning Commission is the informing body on creating it. And it's a policy for how we want new roadway and infrastructure projects to look going forward. We know that townships don't control their roads, obviously, so there's only so much that you can actually do. A policy is a vision document, it's not a legal obligation, but it sets, standards and ideas for what we want our roadway to look like. So you might say, in the urbanized portions of Plymouth Township, every roadway should have a complete sidewalk network and a lawn extension that's at least 6 feet with trees every 20 feet, right? Setting that style. And you say, okay, in the rural portions of the township, each roadway should have at least a 2-foot shoulder of gravel for people to walk on, right? So it's about setting those policies for what a street looks like for both cars and people not using cars in different typologies of street. Complete streets policies used to be one uniform typology. So they'd say, okay, every single street has to have this much sidewalk, this much lawn extension, this much trees. But, townships are kind of moving away from that, and they're getting a complete streets policy that has different recommendations depending on the type of road corridor you're on.
Gotcha.
So we're really just thinking forward about having those policies so that when Wayne County comes to do a project and they say, hey, this is our right of way, we're improving it, we'll say, okay, great, this is our policy, this is what we would like this to look like in order to best serve our citizens. Even though you don't have control over it, it's good to have a policy, just so when projects do come down the line, you have something to go off of. Does that make more
Just to
sense?
take it a step further, most of the wording on the Complete Street project in the 2025 master plan is fine, and I suspect that all or most of us would agree with it. The particular concern I have is a statement that in there says, develop requirements for streets to have a grid pattern and avoid cul-de-sacs. And I just think that's, my own personal view is that a grid pattern for a single-family residential development is way too restrictive. I think cul-de-sacs are a nice feature in those, and you can address the issue of sidewalk, pedestrian, and bicycle use by putting sidewalks from the end of the cul-de-sac to the next normal road, like they do in Ann Arbor. So that's an example of a statement that just goes too far to my comfort level, and I just think we need to have a discussion about it.
Is that even an achievable goal? Because where would we have a grid pattern? I mean, the roads are pretty much established. There's no
Yeah.
large tracts of land left where
Yeah, and again, the commission doesn't have control over roads, but the master plan does talk about transportation, right? So when you are making statements about roads and sidewalks and other things in the right of way, they're all aspirational. You know, at the end of the day, it does come down to Wayne County. So, but yeah, you're right. Even the township as it's developed today is not universally on grid. But yeah, so in terms of the actual report, we can revise that to condense this, like remove the individual bullets, because I have no idea why those 5 bullets were selected, to be honest, because I was not here when the first version of this report was written. And we can just condense it to say work on implementation of the master plan, right?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So taking out all 5 of the bullet points?
Yeah, because those are derived from the draft plan, and really it should just say implement the draft plan, right? That's the actual goal. Okay, any other questions or corrections or typos that I missed?
Anyone else? Okay, I think we're settled on that.
And so the motion before you today would be a recommendation to send this to the Board of Trustees as a receive and file item. And we can make these revisions before it goes to the board, right? So add a list of desired trainings, as well as changing the typo and these other items that we just mentioned. And then ultimately, that would go to the board, and if the board had questions, they could ask them, but it's not an item for the board to vote on, it's just an informational piece.
So do we want to make a motion to accept it as
Amended.
Right.
Mr. Chairperson, I recommend we accept the report as proposed with the amendments we discussed to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Boyd and supported by Commissioner Grieger to approve the annual report with said amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any commissioner comments?
I just had one actual thing that I noticed. On the conditional rezoning, the statement of voluntary conditions, the date on the front is 1/12/23.
Oh, they must have gotten that wrong.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, we can have them correct that for the board.
Right.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
I have a comment. Donnie, I sent you and Laura some comments on the Parks and Recreation Plan,
Thank you.
and I know that some of my stuff is ending up in the spam folder. Did you
Yes.
get those comments?
I did, yeah,
Okay,
and I
good.
passed them on to Laura. She's
Okay.
handling the park plan.
Good. And I wanted to also mention that I raised the possibility of adding Miller Woods in the listing on the entire report, not for a full report like we do on the Township Park, but as an amendment. And actually, in reading through the 2025 master plan, it did address Miller Woods as part of recreation, and actually went so far as to say that the township should consider purchasing that property for recreation if the school board at some point in the future decides they no longer have a need for it. So it's just a little bit more support for just putting Miller Woods in there is just a little, minor point in your bigger report.
Yeah,
But overall, I thought the report was very well done.
Oh, great. I'll tell Laura. She'll be very proud. Also, if, this is a probably unnecessary request, but at the board hearing where the Parks and Recreation Plan will be adopted by the Board of Trustees, the state of Michigan loves to see public comments at that time. So if you want to go and speak in support of the plan or speak against it, whatever you feel like, we would greatly appreciate that.
Do we know when that meeting is going to be?
It's got to be in the next 2 meetings because it's due to the state on February 1st, so probably the next one.
I don't know, I haven't seen the agenda yet for the next meeting.
It's got to be the next one, right? Because
Yeah.
it's, the deadline to submit it to the state of Michigan is
When's the
February
next meeting, the
23rd?
23rd? That's next Tuesday, so we should see the agenda tomorrow.
Yeah, it should be on the one for next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I'll send a note to Jerry to make sure that it is.
Just if you do come and speak, don't say anything about horse race tracks.
And there may very well be other members of the public that want to speak on it, but yeah, so anyway.
Does it look like we'll have a February 7th meeting?
It does, yeah. So we actually have a public hearing scheduled for February 2nd. It's been noticed and it is on the website. The Spars property is submitting a new conditional rezoning request. So they've completely withdrawn, revised, resubmitted. So you
So
can
it's not
consider.
going in front of the Board of Trustees then?
No, it's coming back to you. They've decided to fully resubmit. So different.
Whole new
different plan.
concept?
Moderately new concept. I haven't had a chance to
Moderately new?
review it yet, but that's what's coming on February 2nd. But on January 29th, the only item is the master plan. So there's no voting items on January 29th. It's just going to be a work session. I'll try to bring copies and we can sit around the table if you guys want.
That would be nice to
Snacks?
sit.
Yeah, I can bring snacks again. And then February 7th, that is the only item on the agenda right now, is Spars. And we're trying to keep it that way.
Second or the seventh?
7th, February 7th. We have an early meeting in February because of the elections calendar. So we're trying to keep it that way. So far, no one else has submitted. The only other thing I could see eking onto the agenda would be an ARC sign if one comes through, because we don't have the time for any public notices anymore. So
We don't have another meeting then until I think March 27th.
yeah, it is a big gap. It is a big gap.
So we have a Board of Trustees meeting on February 6th and this on February 7th, right? And then, yeah, that's it for February.
Yep, because
of
of the
the
elections
election.
calendar.
So we need to bring you some no-dos for the February 7th meeting?
So, Jim, are you going to be at these meetings? Because I thought you had another Ask the Treasurer thing.
Yeah, I think these dates are.
Are going to be good for you?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything till third week of February right now.
Okay.
But yeah, if you look at the calendar and you know there's a day you're going to be absent, just let us know. You know, of course, and we'll make sure that you're excused for whatever purpose that it is in advance. We know the schedule's wacky this year.
Yeah, the election, the change of the election law is just really turning everything upside down.
And I know everyone's wondering, has the hydrogen plant submitted yet? And the answer is no. So they're not on the February 7th agenda.
Do you know anything about Ivywood?
Ivywood Classical Academy, they are still working with Wayne County on their proposal. So even though you as a board don't get to review Ivywood, Wayne County does, and they have a lot to say. So at least it's going through them.
So what does Wayne County look at? They look at the site.
Stormwater and also road access. So
Road
the-
access, and what was the first one?
Stormwater.
Stormwater.
So Wayne County recently updated their stormwater standards. Previously, 1 acre of disturbed site area would trigger a stormwater review. Now it's a half an acre. So, I mean, Ivywood is much bigger than that in every dimension, but Wayne County is getting tougher on their stormwater review. What's going on?
Doing a lot of work along Hines Drive, you know, with the ecology type of improvements.
Yep. Oh, and I guess one other quick question, if you'd be interested. Would you be interested in having a session on state preemption of local zoning as a
On
training?
what, sorry?
State preemption of local zoning?
Solar?
Like the
Just in
solar
general, yeah,
farms,
solar included. Would that be a topic
Yeah, I
of
would like
interest
that.
to you folks? Okay, I can add that to the thing as well. Okay, state preemption.
I love it, I know.
Okay, back to commissioner comments. It's not Nani comment time.
Any commission comments? Okay. Is there a motion for adjournment at 8:54?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn at 8:54.
Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Barberina, supported by Commissioner Bayer to adjourn our meeting at 8:54. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned.